Welcome back to the Not Quite Pod. Today we've got Jesi with us. Jesi, did you want to quickly introduce yourself and let everyone know a bit about yourself?
Hello, I'm Jesi Stracham. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina in the United States, and I was in a motorcycle accident that left me a wheelchair user.
Wow. So what I always do at the beginning of the interviews is ask my guests to describe what growing up was like for them. Obviously, your story will be slightly different, having acquired your disability. But can you take us through like what it was like growing up for you, things you were interested in, things you found difficult, and then up to the journey of your accident and how that sort of impacted things?
So I grew up in a small town in the northern part of the country in Ohio. And so I grew up racing four-wheelers, living life off-road. Anything I did literally had wheels around it most of the time. So the fact that I ended up a wheelchair user is quite ironic. I finished high school early and then I went right into the workforce. So I started working full time as an orthodontic assistant. I was the person that tortured people with braces. I changed wires and colors on braces.
Wow. Okay. That makes it even more interesting because of the conversation we had earlier. So you knew exactly what was going on earlier when you had your filling.
Yeah. So I worked in dentistry for 4 years before I was injured and actually returned to work later in my injury. And so I had like a simple childhood, right? Except for I was the reckless child that didn't follow any rules, was always in trouble. And I made a lot of mistakes. And I think that getting paralyzed made me reflect on those mistakes.
But then I suppose like that, the thing is, I think particularly as someone who grew up with a disability, I was very lucky that my parents didn't sort of over Mollycoddle, shelter me and like protect me. It was very much like, you're one of us, you will just get on with things as you do, and we will do everything to make sure that you sort of experience life as a quote unquote normal person. And I think in the disabled community there's a bit of a fine line between trying to protect a child with a disability and also not overprotect them so they can experience the world. But it's nice as well because I think we learn from our mistakes. Like the amount of times I fall over even now and everyone goes, whoa, and I'm like, dude, this happens like daily. Like, I know what you're worried about. It's part and for the course.
It's normal, right? And it's interesting because growing up, I never had interaction with people with disabilities except for people with cognitive disabilities. I would volunteer in that class in my high school. But other than that, I never experienced interaction with another wheelchair user. And so not being disabled, not interacting with people with physical disabilities, it was something I had never been exposed to. And then I went to work at the orthodontic office and we had a patient, and sometimes he'd come in on his crutches and sometimes on his wheelchair. And I was like, man, his life must be so sad. And that was always my thought, right? Because that's the perception that society has had set for so long. And that's part of the reason when I got disabled, I made my platform about rising against that narrative and not playing into a victim of the life that we live, because it's so easy to let society dictate what we're capable of.
100%. What is on that like view, what do you think about like inspiration porn on the flip side of it, like disabled people being praised for going and getting some milk or getting some bread from the store? Like, what's your perspective on that? Because I think it's a fine line between showing the wider community what's possible if someone with a disability is down and they don't know what's possible, showing them what's possible, but then also not feeding into that stereotype. So what's your view on that?
I think that people only know what they've been exposed to. And honestly, if I had saw a wheelchair user pumping gas or grocery shopping before I was injured, I'd be like, dang, that person's getting after it. And you're just like, you're taken aback. It's not something that people see every day. It's not what they're exposed to every day. And on the flip side of that, I ask the people that say you're so inspiring, I always ask them, well, what are you going to do with that inspiration? Because it's one thing for me to be inspiring and inspire you, but if you do nothing with that inspiration, then it's pointless. So yeah, I may inspire you, but what are you going to do with that? And again, as a disabled community, I think we're a little sensitive and we get up in arms about things that are kind of pointless. We let words dictate too much of our happiness and our reality. And so it's like, take a step back and be like, you know what, that's cool. I might be someone's inspiration. You know, they don't see this every day. This isn't something they're regularly exposed to. And now I'm breaking that stereotype and that stigma. Awesome. I'm going
I love that.
first.
I'm a big believer of well, this is why my whole platform is called the Not Quite Podcast, Not Quite Politically Correct. It's because I always worried that talking about disability was almost this like taboo subject that no one really knew how to approach, and no one could speak about it in like a fun and friendly way. So that's why I created it, because I was worried that people were too worried to ask questions. And like you say, it's something I say all the time, which is people only know what they know. They're gonna be inquisitive. That's human nature. That's the way we are built. And I say it's a very tricky line, because I understand why disabled people do struggle sometimes with the terminology that's used and how we want to change that. But then I often come back to the same point I always make, which is that really where we want to be spending our energy? Or is it more physical barriers? Being someone with a physical disability, I'm more concerned about, are they able to get into work okay? Can they use public transport? Can they travel? Can they live a normal life, rather than what a disabled toilet's called? It's like, it's not the big problem, but I think it's really tricky.
I think we make it the big problem. And I wish that as a child, I was told that I'm the one who gives words power. Because growing up, I would let people bully me for how pale I was. And it was like, oh, well, you're Casper, toothpaste, Whitey, ghostly, Chalky, all the nicknames, right? And I gave those nicknames power. And at 13, I begged my mom to let me tan. I was like, please let me tan. I hate this. I hate the color of my skin. And my mom let me do that, rather than saying, well, why? And then I would have said, well, I'm getting bullied. And she would be like, well, you're allowing those people's words to have power over the way you feel about yourself. Do you believe those things to be true? Right? Like, we're all so different. And I think that when we give words power, we're doing a disservice to our capabilities and what we can actually do, because we're so fixated on something that isn't a true barrier to entry.
I completely agree, and I think it's really tricky to sort of build that idea, because then it does feed into like, oh, you can think yourself out of any problem. Now, some circumstances, they do just happen, they suck, and there's no way like your mental gymnastics is going to get you out of that. But then sometimes it's just about zooming out and taking a bit of a wider perspective. If the situation is shit, the situation's shit. That's fine. But also, how much of it have you built up in your head is the other tricky thing. And I think it's really interesting. Whenever I speak to someone who's acquired the disability, they have such a different perspective. And it's really interesting for me, because, as I say, I've not known any different. So I've like grown up, and it's like, it is what it is. I often find it really strange when someone who's acquired the disability is like really shouty, like they're really shouty about something that's going on. But then I'm sat there like, yeah, this is pretty normal. This has been my whole 24 years or 25 years now on this planet. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, it's also the different types of disabilities as well, right?
Yep.
Like my spinal cord injury, it was done. I had my accident. This is what I have. I know what to expect. But then you look at the chronically ill community, and it's like, they don't know what to expect, because it's just hard enough for them to get a diagnosis. So I feel like that community in itself is so used to being discredited by medical professionals that they feel like they have to justify everything. And it's like, that's also doing a disservice, but I don't know that experience. I got my disability and I knew what to expect. This is where we're at. I didn't have to tell anybody I'm not be able to walk. I'm like, these things are happening to me. The doctors knew, right? Whereas that community, there's a catch-22 on both sides. So it's like, how do we uplift each other more as a community? How do we gain more understanding and unity as a community? Because when you look at the LGBTQ community or any minority population, look how they come together to raise their mission, where it feels like the disabled community is working against each other and not able to actually progress in a way that is progressive for us to be included in society. Because again, we're getting so hurt over some bullshit trivial words. and I don't like what this person calls me, or I don't like the name of this, and not actually focused on the real root of the problem. And that's barriers to entry.
I couldn't agree. I'm literally nodding so much. I couldn't agree more. Like it is. I mean, it's so tricky because I think I'm a big believer of we need to create a referral culture. Like I can't speak on the neurodiverse community. I can't speak on the chronically ill community because I'm not that. However, I do have some experience of going, I don't have experience with that, but I can relate to that and I can understand that. So therefore speak to this person, particularly those of us that are creators and work in the social space. Why are we like trying to keep all the work for ourselves and keep all the like attention on ourselves? And really, we should just be bringing more attention to the community rather than going, I want this, I want that. It should just be, oh, I don't know on autism, so I've got a friend that does. He will talk you back to front about everything about it, and then you'll know. And it's the same for me. Like I can talk about cerebral palsy till I'm blue in the face, but I don't know on those other topics. It's so strange. But then also, this brings in another of my worries with the disabled community is we're all in an echo chamber. That is my biggest. As a disabled creator, I just sit there and go, I'm basically shouting at the guy in the wheelchair, we need more reps. And he's like, yeah, we do. And they're like, what is this achieving when actually we need to go to the people that don't know we need more reps and go, we need more reps.
100%. I think that we stay so colluded in our own world that we don't experience anything. And I think the hardest thing living as a disabled person, because we can't bury our disability deep down in us the way people with depression do, or anxiety do, or whatever other mental disorder that you can hide on the outside. I think we allow it to control the way we move in the world and our entire existence and the way we view ourselves, right? But then also on the flip side to the collaboration. So I launched a fitness app in 2022 called Wheel With Me Fitness, and it was for wheelchair users by wheelchair users. And the goal is to have different individuals in the app itself. Well, last year I was like, why am I trying to force something on my own? When you have Nikki Walsh Adapt Fit over here, like diving in and really doing the business when it came to the adaptive training space. And so I'm like, girl, let's split this 50-50. Like you want an app, I have an app. Let's rebrand. Let's merge these two things together to make it better. We're serving such a small community in the grand scheme of the world. And so it's like the more we work together, the better we can actually serve and impact our community in a way that's productive to their growth and their independence.
I completely, but I think that comes back to the thing we were speaking about earlier, how people in the disabled community have such different opinions. So like I might take a very happy-go-lucky approach with my disability, but someone else is like, how dare you joke about your disability? That's just fueling the fire, blah, 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 blah. And then that makes working together really tricky because you're like, oh, I would say this, I would say that. And it's like, it's just, guys, let's focus on the big picture here, guys, big image. But it's really tricky to navigate.
Well, I think it's also this culture of I want the clout, I want to be the one, it has to be about me. And when you make it about you and not the community you're serving, then you're not able to actually do what it is you're trying to do. And I think that's the big frustrating thing about this community is everyone wants to be famous and do the things. It's not about that. Like it's about what impact are you making? Every year I pick a word, and that's my word to define the way I'm living life. And last year it was freedom. I wanted to be free from Social Security disability here in the States, from the government assistance programs. I wanted to be self-sufficient, and I gained that. And this year my word is impact, because I'm just focused on the impact that I'm making on other people, not just my community. I think we isolate ourselves from the non-disabled community, and it's like, for what? Those are your allies in making change actually happen. The more impact you can make on a non-disabled community, the more allies you have in actually creating accessibility and change, because you're raising awareness to things that they aren't exposed to. It's like, oh yeah, I can't go there because it's not accessible. And they're like, wait, what? What about the ADA? And it's like, well, the ADA just looks good on paper. It's outdated again here in the States, but like, it's not we don't have equal access. And I think that's the most frustrating thing. People are fighting over trivial things that they have choices over fighting. And it's like, we don't even get to come be a part of that conversation because it's on the second floor and there's no elevator for us to get there. It's like, that's the most frustrating part about where we are right now. And so many people are just their priorities are just absolutely fucked.
Like, it's the same here in the UK. Like, people go, oh, but like the Equality Act of 2010 means that everyone should be able to access work. And I'm like, yeah, tell that to the CEO that's like, nah, we can't hire a disabled guy because he'll be at the hospital all the time. When actually, I am at the hospital the least out of every fucker that's in there.
No, I worked full time. Okay, so I went back to my dad got COVID, and I had to find, like, I was trying to apply for housing, and my monthly government benefit wasn't enough for me to afford housing. And so I was like, I have to go back to work. What do I know how to do to make a good living? I was like, I'm an orthodontic assistant. Let me go work on some teeth. I start working at this office, and the next thing I know, I'm like the clinic lead, all this. When I'm telling you that at least one of my clinic girls called out at least once a week for the entire, I was there for over a year, and like the entire year I was there, a non-disabled person called out at least once a week. I didn't call out until I broke my spinal fusion in half and had to go get surgery again. And I'm like, how is it that you are going to call out for a runny nose? This one girl called out for a UTI. A non-disabled girl called out for a UTI. And I was like, what? Where am I right now? Like, what world do we live in that these people, their problems are so big that they just can't power through and work hard through it? And I think it's this culture, that's the victim culture that's been created as a whole. And we're not only seeing it in our community, but when you look at that macro view of the world, it's something that people are leaning really hard into.
I think it's really tricky because I think a lot of that stems from, as well, other people having to prove themselves, whether it be the racial community, disabled community, LGBTQ+, and then it's the tricky thing of like, why do certain people get better accommodations than others? But like, so I'm not, my view is like, look, if you need a sick day, you need a sick day. However, because I know UK approach to that is slightly different in the US. We actually get sick days depending on your work situation. But it's weird that like we have this thing in our heads where we have to work 12 times harder than anyone else because we're the first person that's ever going to get fired if that has to happen. And that is actually a terrible rationale because it's not always true. But we have it in our heads like, oh yeah, if firing has to happen, I'm first. Like, which is stupid. That's
like perspective is reality, right? And so what you perceive to be true is going to be true. So if you believe that you're at the bottom of the totem pole solely because of your disability, then that is going to be your reality. And that's something I found out early on. I'm not different or above anybody else. I was definitely a victim of my reality when this happened to me. I was like, well, because I'm a wheelchair user, you should feel bad for me. You should help me. And it's like, wait a minute, what have I done to deserve this? Is it just because I'm simply existing as a wheelchair user, or is it because I've actually done something that's worth being recognized for? And when I had that realization with myself, I was like, oh shit, like, I'm a wheelchair user. It doesn't matter. That doesn't make me special. That doesn't make me different. It's what I do with that that's going to actually make that special and make it different. And so that's when I had that shift, that's when life changed for me. And I stopped leaning into this victimness of, oh, well, because I'm a wheelchair user. And it's like, no, because I'm Jesi Stracham. That's why.
It's really interesting. I mean, I will openly say it, and I'm sure Jesi would as well. If the shoe fits and I have to use my disability to get something, I'm gonna fucking do it because it's there. But it's really interesting. Like, oftentimes our disabilities become our identities, and I think that's the other thing as well. Like, when you're known as, it's hard as well, particularly working in the creator space. You do get known as the disabled ginger creator in my context, but it's like, it's weird. Like, why does the wheelchair have to come into it? But then also, it is our weird, unique selling point. So I suppose there is that as well.
I think it's our superpower, honestly. It's what makes us resilient. And something that corporations should look at is people with disabilities are typically great problem solvers because we're constantly having to solve problems just to be able to go out and live day to day. And so if you want somebody that's going to solve the problems at your workplace, go ahead and hire a person with a disability because I'm telling you, they'll be 10 times better. They'll do time management because we're so good at doing things in steps so we don't have to backtrack. because when you do things methodically and in steps, it saves you time because you lose time being disabled. And it's like, if people looked at it that way, then in not just like the non-disabled community, but if disabled people looked at themselves that way and looked at their powers. And I made a post about this the other week about the way we look at ourselves when we look in the mirror, right? What's the first thing you notice? You start picking out all the things you don't like. And I said, what if you switch the script within your mind and you start picking out what it is you do like? And so I made it a point of that, because typically when I look in the mirror, the first thing I notice is my belly. And that's what I want to fixate on, is my parabelly. And I'm like, no, that's not what I'm going to fixate on. I have a great smile. I like my eyes. And then I'm like, even deeper than that, right? You dive in. What else do you like about yourself? I love my heart. I love my mind. I love how creative I am. And when you start picking out all these things you love about yourself, what you don't like becomes a lot less of the main focus. And so this is a practice that I've been doing daily for a hot minute. I'm talking like 2 years or so, to trying to develop that confidence in that self-love. And now it's turned into, I'm my favorite person on earth I love to spend time with. I like to spend time in worship for God, and then I like to spend time with my girl. And I'm like, Jesi Stracham is my favorite human in this earth that we live on. And to be able to say that from somebody who didn't love herself, who didn't respect herself, who just freely gave her body to any man that was willing to take it, from going from that person before I was injured to becoming this powerful human being that happens to have a disability, that's the game changer. And I think that's the biggest thing.
But it's what we spoke about earlier. It's perspective. So you're putting it in perspective. And I think it's also important to highlight that, like, I'm pretty sure, or you'll say the same thing, like, you're not going to be up at the top of the mountain every day. Like, there are going to be times when you completely nosedive. It'll be like, oh my God, I was on cloud 9 one day and I'm on ground zero the next. But I think it's that whole thing, like we said, of zooming out and going, actually, where am I at today? What have I achieved today? What can I do better tomorrow? And obviously, we're going to touch on as well, because it's come through very clearly that you also work as a mindset coach.
Yeah.
And I wanted to touch on that because it's in the very early part of our conversation, it came through very clear, like, you're all about uplifting. So obviously you work and you also run several other businesses. So what's been your story when it comes to business and like mindset coaching and all the projects you work on?
So I launched Wheel With Me Fitness in 2017 in the form of a Facebook group. And fitness and nutrition are what actually gave me freedom, especially nutrition. Nutrition gives us so much control over not only our body composition, but our health and wellness as a whole. A food is a major factor in everything from your happiness to your immunity to your muscular structure to the way that your body functions. And so it really started with that for me, as nutrition coaching. And that's where my passion is. But as I was nutrition coaching, I'm like, dang, all these people just want mindset coaching. Like, all of our nutrition calls ended up being about mindset. And so I was like, I spent money to be a certified nutrition coach. Dang it. Like, now I'm about to spend money to be a mindset coach. And so I just really started kind of backpedaling into reverse engineering. What did I do to get to where I currently am? What did that look like? How did I develop this grit and determination where nobody else and my external factor is going to dictate where I go, where my external situations, if things turn around for the day, it's not going to control my day? How did I get here? And so I reverse engineered that. And that's what I started talking with my nutrition clients about. I'm like, all right, so you want to achieve X? Well, this is what we're going to do. And we break it down in a way that they're actually able to achieve that. And then fitness and nutrition come in on the back end of that, because it all plays together. That's how my journey went. I started with fitness, and then I started focusing on mindset and nutrition. And I'm like, if I can get people in the mindset first, we can add all that in on the back end and really take them to the next level. And my whole goal is for people not to have to work with me again. I have 2 clients or 3 clients now. One's was down 100 pounds when we stopped working together. He continued to lose weight because he learned food. He understood food.
Yeah.
I have another client, she lost 70 pounds with me. She's maintained that 70 pounds off. She hasn't tracked her nutrition in 6 months because she understands food. She's making good choices. I have another client. She's in the middle of her weight loss journey, but she stopped tracking and she's still keeping her weight off. And that's the most impactful part, right? Is like not only understanding food, but being disciplined enough to maintain that understanding and prioritizing that. Because weight loss, I saw something that just pissed me off, and I'm not fat phobic. I'm health conscious. It's not about your weight. It's about how is your body functioning and how's your body going to function 10, 15, 20 years from now, especially for my disabled people, but before my other people, chronic illness is on a rise. What's the one thing that's also been on a rise? Our access or lack of access to quality foods. We'd be lying to ourselves if we didn't say there was a correlation between the two. And so for me, it's about preserving health. It's about longevity of health. I see my parents who are in their late 60s, almost 70 years old, and I'm watching their health deteriorate quickly. When they hit 60, it was like all of a sudden their health just started dropping. But they've done nothing to be proactive leading up to that, and they're doing nothing to be proactive after the fact. And I'm like, I don't want to end up that way, and I don't want my fellow human to end up that way.
I completely agree. And I think you've said it there. It's like food and health and wellness and sort of mindfulness, they go hand in hand together. Like I can say hand on heart, like if I've screwed my diet, like it's changed over the years because I think I've understood it more being a para athlete. I went through the stage of like, oh, I must be shredded all the time to like, as long as I keep a base level, we're pretty good. But like, I think it comes down to like what I was going to say was the food you put in does affect your mindset, but then also it's the way you view food. I think that's another big thing of like people get too fixated on if I go over my calories one day, or if I go over my diet one day, or I eat a chocolate bar another day, depending on which way you want to view it. Everyone views it the same way. They just say different words. Right. It's like, it's not going to kill you. Like you can backtrack. It's fine. Like it's not going to, like I was a big believer when people I'm not a qualified nutritionist or anything of the sort, but whenever people used to ask for advice, I would say first things first, don't focus on daily targets. Do not focus on them because you will drive yourself absolutely fucking nuts. Focus on weekly targets, if not monthly ones, because then you're not going to be like, oh my God, I've gone over. When actually, if you look at it, zoom out, look at it again and go, oh wait, actually, we're pretty good. We're in the green.
Yeah. That's what I tell. So we do primarily macro tracking because when you break food down, when you break it down to protein, carb, and fat, you have so much more control because protein, if you want to be lean, if you want to be shredded, if you want to create muscle, if you just want to get stronger, protein's going to help get you there. That's what creates muscle. Carbs and fats are actually what create mass in the weight gain or weight loss. And so when you control these on a macro level like that, it just gives you so much more control over your body. But at the same time, don't starve yourself and don't restrict yourself. And I think that's the biggest mistake people make is that they restrict themselves. If you eat clean 80% of the time, you're still going to get results.
Yep.
And that's the biggest thing. It's the 80-20 rule. Don't focus so much. You don't have to be perfect every day. Now, I strive for that because I like it. That's the way I like to live my life.
Yeah.
You don't have to live your life that way to create results.
The one question I wanted to ask you, as we come into January, a lot of people's New Year's resolutions come in and a lot of people want to get in better shape, get healthier, X, Y, Z. But a lot of people are beating themselves up because of what they've done over the festive period. They've eaten too much, drunk too much, and X, Y, Z. I have a question. As a nutritionist, did you overindulge over Christmas?
I didn't even track the last month of the year.
Case and point. Everyone does it. It doesn't matter what you do as a profession. Everyone does it. It's fine. You won't die, I promise.
No, you won't. And it's honestly, it's good for your psyche and your soul. And that's something that we practice. So there's something called periodization. And it's where you go through different phases. And so when people go on vacation, I'm like, you know how to be, don't eat like an asshole, but don't worry about tracking either. And that's the real conversation I have, because one day is not going to make or break you. And if you're trying to get out of a situation, you need to realize that you didn't get into that situation in one day. So it's going to take time to get out of it as well. Too many people expect instant results. And that's not the way anything works worthwhile or worth having, essentially.
Completely agree. Also, the other one I wanted to ask, I'm a big advocate for it just because it works better for me. What is your view on intermittent fasting, as it's a bit of a hot topic at the moment and a lot of people are using it? What's your view on it?
You know, the biggest issue with people is we undereat. That's the main reason that people can't lose weight, is you're undereating. And when you undereat, your metabolism's not able to function properly. And just because you're disabled does not mean you need to be eating 1,200 calories or less. That shit is a lie. Your body's still functioning. And I'm talking about as a low functioning para, right? Like, I'm not talking about a quad, but like so many people with disabilities just undereat in general. And that's the biggest disservice you can do. I personally don't think intermittent fasting's great because you do train your metabolism to function in that way. And then if you don't, it can cause some issues. It can also cause your metabolism to run slower because you're starving yourself. You're not eating enough throughout the day. So I personally don't ever recommend it. But that's just my personal take on it. Because I'm sure other people out here, they're going to be like, yeah, do it.
I mean, my thing is more like, so mine started as a thing of like, I obviously, back when I was 13 up until the age of like 18, I was swimming every day. I was doing about 4 hours in a pool, 24 hours a week in a pool. So I was burning a ridiculous amount of calories. And then once I stopped doing that level of training, like I still train now, but not to that extent, I had to sort of retrain my body. Like, dude, we don't need 12,000 calories anymore. We need to calm down. So that was part of the reason why. And then now it's just more of a preference. Like I'm not a morning person, guys. I'm really not. Ask Gina, ask anyone. Don't talk to me unless I've had my first coffee of the day. Like, don't do it. But yeah, it's just interesting because I think as well, too many people are like, oh, you need to stick to this certain type of diet, like whether it be keto, whether it be intermittent fasting, whether it be macro, micro, anything like that. You just do the basics. Strip it back to the basics. If you want to stick, if structure helps you and like you want to do like, oh, I'm keto or I'm this, I'm that, that's fine. But also, if you fluctuate, don't kill yourself. Like, don't kill yourself about it.
I don't ever recommend any of the fad diets because people's biggest struggle is typically application and actually following through with that and consistently following through with that. So if you get your body into ketosis and then you binge eat one day, now your body's out of ketosis and it's going to take time to get back into that. And so it's like, why are you putting yourself on this limited thing? That's why I love macro tracking so much, because if you get it to fit in your macros, you're going to get results. Like that's the way macro tracking works. If you meet your macros and your metabolism, you've got your metabolism right, like you're functioning well, you're going to get results. If your dessert doesn't blow your macros out of the water and send you over crazy on calories every single day, you're going to get results. The issue is people want the results right away. With keto, I lost 4 pounds and I've done the keto diet and I lost 4 pounds in 3 weeks. That's a big change, right? That's instant results. But then as soon as I get carbs and started getting water again into my muscles, obviously it's going to change my body composition because I'm no longer in ketosis. And so it's those type of things of like, if you just track the macros for 6 months, you're going to lose the weight. Collectively, with my personal nutrition training, I've been a nutrition coach for 3 years now. We've lost as a group over 500 pounds.
Wow.
All for macro tracking.
Yeah. I mean, one question I've always wondered, and this is more of a personal question, but hopefully it will help other people. One thing I've always wondered is people have said, I've had contradicting info. So one person has said, because of my disability, my body naturally burns more. And some people have said, because I'm not moving around as much, my body doesn't burn as much. But then when I do exercise, it will burn extra. So what is your view as someone with a disability and also done your fair time in working in nutrition? What is your perspective on it? I mean, I sort of know, I've just known through tracking calories and figuring out what numbers work and what numbers don't. But in terms of like the science, have you ever thought about it?
It's trial and error. Everybody's body, disabled or not, is different. Your metabolism, you'll function different. Most people, you can do normal macros, disabled or not, normal prescription, it's going to get results. And then you have this little outlier where they have either a high metabolism or not. But if you prioritize water, prioritize sleep, meet calories and protein, track everything with a calorie in it, including drinks, and you meet those in your macros and you resistance train, you're going to get results. The biggest thing that people miss out on is resistance training. People want to go push and ride their bike and do all this extra cardio that's not going to allow you to lose weight. You're going to burn more calories by lifting weights up. Resistance train.
Yeah.
That's going to help you get results. If you feel like you've hit a plateau and you're like, what the hell? I'm not able to get any change. Resistance train. So that's the big question I ask people. I'm like, what is your activity? That's what's going to dictate really where your calories are. Because if you're not lifting weights, then we're not going to be putting you on something for a weightlifting regimen.
It's really interesting because particularly, you'll be able to speak on this more than I have, but like whenever I speak to people that are looking into weight training, particularly females, there's still, even to this day with so much information available, there's still this theory that, I don't want to get big and bulky. And I'm like, you can't. Like, you physically can't. I don't know what else to tell you. It's biologically not possible.
It is, but you have to eat so many carbs and fats to put on mass. That's the biggest thing. If you want to be lean and toned, eat protein. Prioritize protein. I think that's the biggest one I have to fight too, right? Is protein's going to make me bulky. Protein's not going to make you bulky. Overeating carbs and fat is going to make you bulky. Straight up. I put on 10 pounds of muscles from October to December because I was in bulk calories. And you wouldn't even be able to tell. I still look lean. But I put on all this weight and it was purposeful weight gain, but it's because of food and the way I use food to manipulate my body.
It's so interesting that like so many these like old stereotypes, and I say this like I have been quote unquote bodybuilding since I was about 16, and the bullshit I used to do, I was like, what? Now I look back at it and go, what the fuck was I doing? Like the whole you must drink protein half an hour after your workout. The fuck doesn't make a difference. Like, but it's so interesting how even to this day we still have those old school views. Like I say, one of those is that for females, protein is gonna make them bulky, or they're just gonna get big. It's just, how do we get rid of these? How do we? Just promote healthy living. I think also, as we've already said, people want to fit into this pretty little box of like, I'm a keto person. I'm this person. So I'm like, just do.
Right. I think it's stop doing what everyone tells you. Stop focusing on things that aren't actually getting you results. The definition of insanity is the way people love to live life. Continuing to do the same thing and expecting something to change along the lines. If you change nothing, nothing changes. If you want to see change in your life, in the world, regardless of what it is, you have to be the one to be the change. And if you're not willing to take that first step, then you're going to stay in the situation where you're unhappy. And so this is a lot of self-reflection, a lot of time alone. Spend time in silence. Stop distracting yourself with social media, music, games, whatever it is, Netflix on your phone, and just spend a moment in silence trying to understand what it is that you want, where you want to go, and what you want your life to look like. And when you figure out where you're trying to go, you can look at your daily habits and be like, well, is this actually progressing me towards that goal or getting me further from it? And when you have that honest, real conversation with yourself about this, then you're like, oh, I'm the problem in my life. Oh, I'm the reason I'm not where I'm supposed to be. And when you take self-responsibility, then you're able to show up. And then you get to a point where no one can tell you anything and no one's opinion of you matters. If you don't like me and you think I'm an ableist, then cool. I don't give a shit. If you like me and I'm adding value to your life, awesome. Let's do this together. Like I truly am at a place where I really don't care what people think about me. And it's because I've become so undeniable. I stopped lying to myself. Think about how many times you throw something on the calendar that you're going to do for you to progress you, but then you're like, oh, it doesn't matter. I'll do it later. And then you never do it. you're lying to yourself.
Yeah,
If you can't
yeah.
trust your own word, you have no confidence in yourself.
And having said that, I will hold my hands up and say I've been there, done that. I still battle with that today. Still battle with the whole putting something in your calendar and going, I'm going to do that later. Later comes and something else comes in and out the window it goes. But then I think as well it comes back to what we said earlier of like also accepting that mistakes are going to happen. And that's throughout life, whether it be training, whether it be business, whether it be anything you're doing. But it's the whole thing of like, just accept it and go, okay, let's try again tomorrow. It's not the end of the world. Too many people get in this little bubble. And it's really interesting. And one thing I wanted to ask you again as a nutritionist is your point of view on alcohol. Now, this is a bit of a weird one when it comes to nutrition, and also it's a really hard one to advise on because it's hard to say to the person that likes to go out for a drink, only have 2 or only have this or only have that, because we all have been there where we've had a few drinks and we're like, we're on number 5 now, we might as well just keep going.
See, I quit drinking a year and a half into my spinal cord injury because it was just causing too many health issues, bowel bladder issues. If people want to drink, okay, but you should also be mindful and not overindulge, and that goes with anything. Yep. So once a month, go out to the pub, enjoy your time, do what you do. When people want to drink, I'm like, we got to fit it in your macros, or you have to realize, is your goal to get drunk or is your goal to actually get to your goal? And that's, I think that's also having that honest conversation and reality check with yourself, because I could literally go in on all the negative effects of alcohol when it comes to recovery, your ability to create muscle, your ability to function properly, your ability to actually get quality sleep. Like the biggest thing, alcohol affects your sleep and the way that you do sleep, quality of sleep, and having a drink every day after work is not going to be productive to your recovery because you're not getting quality sleep. So you wake up, you feel exhausted. Oh, it could be because you had that drink the night before. And so for me personally, I quit drinking. I don't like alcohol, but people come to that on their own as well.
I think, what about advising clients? So is it literally just you say to them, look, we've got to fit this in? That's okay, fair enough.
And it's having that honest conversation as well of, okay, you want to go out, you go enjoy your Saturday, don't blow your food out of the water. Like, be mindful of that. If you're going to drink, you have to be mindful in other areas. And that's the name of the game. Like, you have to be willing to make sacrifice in other areas to be able to have one thing. So if you want to be completely shredded and ripped, then you need to give up those fried foods and that alcohol. You need to be getting quality sleep. But if you want to go enjoy your time and live life and just, get your results and lose a little bit of weight, but still be able to enjoy life, cool. Have that social time, once a month where you're drinking, and you could still go out and get non-alcoholic drinks and still be a part of the crowd. Because a lot of times the drinking is for the socialization. Yep. So let's talk about, virgin drinks. Like, there's nothing better than the one that I can't remember. It comes in like a really iron glass or something. It's like a metal glass that it comes in, but it's really good when you have it with no alcohol in it. I like Virgin Bloody Marys. Like, I'm here for all of it.
This is the new thing for me. So, like, I'll be 100% transparent. I'm coming from an Irish family. Drinking is very much part of our culture. Funny enough, like we've recently had a lot of family events and stuff, and I think the hardest thing, and I know this is a lot of people's own barriers, the hardest thing is the peer pressure that comes with drinking. So, like, particularly in British people and Americans love a drink, but particularly when it comes to Brits, we like a drink, and we like to do it properly, as we would say. But I think there's this big culture at the moment where, like, you feel peer pressure into it because of the crowd you're in. And that's where, as you've said, I've utilized like non-alcoholic beers, because unless someone examines your bottle or your glass, no one's going to bloody know. 100%. But then there is still that awkward bit of, like, someone's buying you a drink and you're like, oh, can I get a 0? And then there's that weird glance over, like, wait, hold on, what? And then, but I think that culture is changing. That culture now is changing, particularly with my generation. We're not as like, oh my God, I need to drink. But it's interesting, obviously, when I go out with my family and stuff like that, that's a little bit different. There is that, like, why would you want to drink zero? And it's like, well, because there's only so much water and Coke, Diet Coke you can drink. Like, there's not a lot of other choices.
Agreed. I agree with that 100%. And we Wheel With Me Foundation, we host meetups, and again in the States and in Charlotte, and we host one at a brewery, and the brewery has kombucha on tap. And so I'm always drinking kombucha out of my little beer sign, like that. I think that too, just finding ways to spice it up. And something Nikki does, especially around the holidays, was she made like seltzer drinks or kombucha drinks that with the little garnishes to make it look like an alcoholic drink, but it was non-alcoholic. And so she was able to still enjoy the festivities with her family and have that. I think that's finding ways around it. You don't have to drink to be social. And when I understood that, that's what did it for me. I became my friend's DD when I first got injured. So I drank probably for the first year, and then I finally gave up alcohol, but I still went out with my friends. We went to the clubs, and I'd be like, oh, I'll drive your drunk asses home. Like, and it still allows you to but get to be a part of things. And honestly, being sober and in those social situations, I was able to enjoy the situation more, but then also reflect on what do I want in my life? And is this the type of crowd I want to be with? And I noticed that the crowd of people I hung out with changed as well, because I wanted to go a different path in a different direction. And so quitting drinking allowed me to view that as well. And I think that that's also why I have kind of the perspective around it that I have. But as a nutrition coach, it's not my place to say, oh, you can't have a drink. Like, no, you definitely can still enjoy that if that's something you truly enjoy. But I also want you to ask yourself, are you drinking to numb the pain? Or are you drinking to actually just enjoy your time? Is it just enjoying time out? Do you actually enjoy the drink itself, or is it the experience that goes along with it? There's a lot more to drinking than just taking it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, again, I'll be 100% transparent. Like, me and Gina, my partner, were having a conversation the other day of, like, I'd say come from quite a big drinking culture in my family and stuff like that. But, like, for me, a lot of mine comes from, like, so my brain is 100 miles an hour. Like, I'm not sure whether there's possibly something else going on there. So, like, my brain, the best way to describe it, did you ever play the Nintendo Wii? Like, do you know the characters? The little characters that you used to build? Basically, if you ever clearly Jessie's never played it, but like basically you used to build these little characters, and if you ran into the wall, they'd run around with their arms shaking. So the way I describe the inside of my head is, though, basically, if I've got a problem that I need to solve, that little character will run from each section of my brain trying to figure out what the answer to the equation is. So as you can imagine, that gets very chaotic. So oftentimes, Gina always goes to me, why is it when you've had a beer that you'll come up with like a really clear vision of what you want to do, but when you're sober you can't do it? And I think it is just that whole thing of it just brings the quietness in. But then that questioned the other bit of like, that's not healthy. I need to look at that a little bit more. But then, so that's me being transparent of saying, look, I'm on a journey with it as well, of saying like, I want to drink less. I don't think I want to give up in terms of I still enjoy a drink, but I definitely want that was one of my New Year's resolutions, is drinking less. And I've definitely overshared, but that is the whole point of this podcast.
No, and, that's your truth too. And I can't lie and say I don't indulge in anything, right? Before I was injured, I drank every single day, and that was the culture I lived. But then after I got paralyzed, I started partaking in cannabis. And so now I'm in the cannabis culture, and that's a completely different side of things, right? Like,
I was going to ask, that was my next question, but basically, because that was coming on to the drinks thing. Like the other day, I was not drinking, I was the designated driver, but the restaurant I was at had CBD drinks, and they made a cocktail out of it. And I was like, actually, that's a really cool idea. And also, yeah, it just worked. But it's another thing I wanted to ask you, is if you've ever played with CBD, cannabis. So clearly you've just answered that question.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm a big advocate for cannabis, especially CBD. And it's not so much the high aspect, but when you use the cannabinoids correctly, you can actually have full pain relief. And so many people go into
Yep.
these dispensaries and they're like, oh, I want as high as THC as possible, thinking that's what's going to help them. It's like, no, if you use it correctly and get a good ratio of CBD to THC, you can actually have full body pain relief where you feel nothing. And it's
Yep.
incredible, the healing properties of it in itself. But that's my social thing is definitely cannabis. When I went to Amsterdam last year and I had an absolute ball because I felt
Yep.
like I was in a place where it was accepted and it was fine and I
Yep.
wasn't a weirdo. And similar to how you probably feel in the UK when you're like, oh, I don't want to drink with alcohol right now. That's how it is for me in the southern part of the States, in the Bible Belt, as we call it, which I love God and I don't want to say it like that. But there are some people that have this negative connotation around cannabis and thinking it's the devil's lettuce when really it's just God's grass.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. Like I've been taking CBD now for about 2-ish years, on and off, just because of finance, because it's not cheap.
No,
and like it does. Like the biggest benefits for me was I always struggled with sleeping. Sleeping was always, like I've just explained, got a very overactive brain. Would often be laying there at 11 o'clock at night with my next big idea. And so then it just helped quieten that down, and also meant I got better quality sleep. All of my sort of aches and pains disappeared. I was definitely more when it came to thinking. I had more clarity. I'm a big believer of it as well. I'm a big advocate of like legalizing it here in the UK, and we're taking steps towards that. But I don't know, because I think the older generation still has that connotation of like it's a bad thing. But then from what I've seen, I can't wrap my head around like, wait, so hold on. The behaviour I see with drunk people is nowhere near as bad as what I see with people that have partaken in a bit of weed. Like, it's like...
high people don't hurt people. That's what I say all the time.
High people normally just laugh.
Right. They don't hurt people. Like, you rarely hear of somebody on cannabis going in and killing their entire family, or going out and doing these mass crazy things. And it's like, it's not a bad thing. And it's also a plant. It's like, I feel in my mind, it's better than a lot of these meds that we're given, that we have to take for a long period of time, that are going to have a negative effect on our organs. And that's what I was thinking about when I got injured. I'm like, how can I have a natural way of managing pain that's not going to absolutely destroy my body?
I completely agree. And obviously, I do have to add that it's kind of like, it is still illegal here in the UK. Like, don't. But there is definitely positives to it. I mean, I have to say that before YouTube goes, what the fuck, bro? So yeah, here you go, YouTube. It's still illegal, but like, I think they just need to expand the way they think about it, because I think too many people. And I think as well, adding the control is what I'm also a big advocate for, because then you know what people are getting. If they're buying it, like you see in Amsterdam, you buy it in a store, like no one's going to mess with it. No, like it is what it is. Like it hasn't been through like 1,500 hands where you don't know what they've done with it or anything else. It's literally then and there. It's controlled. They know. I mean, they know who's purchased it. I'm sure they've got cameras in the shop. Like it's strange that we still battle it today. But there you go. There you go.
That's how I feel here too. Like, realistically, the fact that it's not completely legal in every state. Now you're leaving open for these street things, and you're seeing such a high rise in the amount of fentanyl deaths. And that's scary. And that's sad. And I think I personally have been affected by it. I know somebody who has passed from that. And so it's like, that could have been avoided if there was more control, potentially, on less control in cannabis, more control in pharmaceuticals.
I think control all around is like that's just needed in general. But I think as well is undemonizing the people that use it, because I think that's another big issue as well. Is that people, well, like you say, you're always watching over your shoulder, or like worried about what's going. Like the weirdest thing was like, so I went to Prague recently in Czech Republic, and so walked into Prague, didn't Google, didn't know anything about it. Walked in and I went, is it me, or does that shop say buy your THC here? And I'm like, hang on, what? So anyway, I Googled it, And it turns out in Prague, it is illegal, but not illegal to sell.
Well, that's
What?
silly.
Yeah, so you can't use it, but you can buy it. Like what? So like I get annoyed at because I'm like, it either is or it isn't.
Right. There's no.
Why is the
What?
It was so strange. So every kind just different things, but yeah, I think control is key, and also I think for anyone that's dealing with chronic pain or any kind of disability, CBD is definitely worth experimenting with. And definitely worth testing out and seeing how you react to it, because from your experience and my experience, it's definitely helped with any chronic issues. And if anyone does know, because it is something I want to do on this podcast, and if anyone knows a specialist in it that I can interrogate, please let me know. But yeah, it's really interesting. The other thing I wanted to touch on just briefly is the mindset coaching as well, because we've talked a lot about the nutrition element with yourself, but we didn't touch on the mindset. So that obviously you said that they come sort of hand in hand, and it's been a very natural journey. But what's the journey been with mindset coaching in terms of the learning process? Because I'm always intrigued of like what the course that you take entails, because it's kind of like, I feel like particularly with something like mindset coaching, it's one of them skills like you got to have the base of it. Like you've got to be that kind of person, the kind of person that wants to motivate someone rather than someone that's maybe more introverted. So what's the learning process like?
But when it came to being a mindset coach, I found my own experience was the one thing that really helped me when it came to how I addressed something that I struggled with, right? At the end of the day, we all struggle with something. We all have our barriers. We all have things that feel like we're not able to overcome them. And I think the biggest thing that a lot of people underestimate when it comes to conquering your mindset is just doing the things that you don't want to do. There was a David Goggins quote the other day, and he's like, you have to figure out what your I really don't want to do it, but I'm going to do it anyways looks like in your day-to-day life. What are those tasks? How can you use those to achieve what it is you want to achieve? And how can you have that internal conversation with yourself? But you also have to realize that if you don't take action, nothing's going to happen. And it's having a lot of those real conversations. With coaching as a whole, I found the biggest issue that human beings have, it's not lack of information, it's lack of application. They don't lack the knowledge and know-how and to overcome what it is they need to overcome or achieve what it is they want to achieve. They lack the actual discipline to execute in making that happen. And so that's where a coach really comes in more as accountability side of things.
Yeah, 100%. That was exactly what I was going to say. It's more that being that person to be sort of the person in your ear going, are you sure you want to do this, rather than you relying on yourself as an individual, because we've all been there, and where like you've let the devil on your shoulder get in there and change what you wanted to do. And so it's nice as well, and I think it's nice for coaches because you get to see a person grow. Like I've never had a coach in that context, but I can imagine it is really nice to see them from being like not very sure on their decisions to completely being like, okay, yeah, they've got it, the penny's dropped, they know exactly what they're doing. That must be really cool.
It's really rewarding. It's really cool to see people achieve what they set out to achieve. Whether it's starting a podcast or writing a book or just being a better spouse, weight loss, whatever it is that someone's trying to achieve, helping them achieve it is the most rewarding thing I get to do.
100%. And I imagine one of the other questions I wanted to ask you, and I imagine this links in with it, is what made you start social media?
I fell on a hotel room floor about 2 years into my injury and I couldn't get back up. And so I posted a meltdown on YouTube, and that meltdown got a lot of views quickly.
And I did not find that in my research.
Yeah, it's called Frustrations of Paralysis. And because that meltdown got so many views so quickly, I was like, wow, people are really listening to what I say. I wonder what would happen if I started putting some positivity in the world. And so I just became more
Wow.
mindful about what I shared. Yeah. And I started just sharing my life in a positive light. And here we are, when did I start? 2018 is when or 2017 is when I
Wow.
started focusing on the growth. And so from 2017 to now, I've built all my platforms organically, mainly doing podcasts just like this. I get on people's podcasts, I get to hear about their platform and share their platform and get to share my story with their audience. And it's been a really cool journey.
I mean, I love and hate when this happens with my guests because I sit there and go, that didn't come up in my research. That makes me look terrible. But then also people get a genuine reaction from me of like, I did not see that fucking coming. So here we are. But wow, that's actually really cool. Like the way that you like took that really like negative experience and went, do you know what? Let's for want of a better word, run with this, wheel with this, whatever you want to call it. And it's really nice to see. And it's really nice as well. Like it's very genuine. You can see that from you. Like you just want to help people, and that just comes very naturally to you because it's come through very, very clearly in this podcast. Like it's just so nice to see someone that just genuinely wants to help. I think it's what we spoke about earlier of like the communities, whether it be the disabled community or even just the community in general, need to just support each other more and try and be a little bit more positive. I'm not saying that that's going to be it all the time, but you definitely have brightened my day a little bit. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing your platform with me as well. This has been a good time.
It's been a pleasure. Just before we wrap up, I always ask my guests this question, which is, what's one piece of politically correctness that you really strongly agree with or disagree with? It doesn't have to be disability related. It can be something completely different. It's essentially, what's a pet peeve of yours that you really want to get out there and change?
I think that we coddle people too much on how they feel. And we need to get over our feelings. If I waited to feel motivated, because motivated is a feeling, I would never take action in my life. If I waited to feel happy on days that I feel like shit, I wouldn't take action in my life. We act on feelings too much. Feelings are fleeted. They're not permanent. They come and go. And the way life happens, it dictates that. And if you continue to operate solely on your feelings, life is going to be a lot harder than it has to be. When you just start taking action and operate on your desires and your goals and your wishes for your life, it becomes a hell of a lot more fulfilling.
I completely agree with that. And I think as well, I although people are going to respond to that and say like, oh, but like we shouldn't discredit feelings. But I think what you're trying to say there is just don't get too wrapped up in them and think that they're the finite thing.
Right. And people take things so literal too, right? And that's a prime example. Like you're taking your feelings. You don't like what I just said and it makes you feel some type of way. How about you reflect on why you're feeling that way based on what I said? And that's something I do. When people say things, and for me, not to be political, but a big thing is politics. When people try to determine right, left, red, blue, whatever, and they want to put this category, and it's like, well, why is what this person's saying triggering me? Why do I feel this way? And when I address that on why someone's words are making me feel that way and internalize it to myself, then I have a different understanding. And we get so caught up and overwhelmed with how we feel, we never take action and we never achieve what it is we're capable of. So that's the big thing. Don't get caught up. Don't stay there. You're allowed to feel how you feel. It's completely valid. That's you. It's how you feel. No one can take that away from you. But at the same time, you staying there is that's not an excuse. Like that's not a thing you can do. Just because you feel some way is not an excuse to stay in there.
100%, and it's exactly what we've said quite a few times in this podcast. Zoom out and perspective, like that's probably going to be the title. So, but where can, if people want to follow your journey, where can they find you? Yeah.
First things first, please follow Wheel With Me Foundation. We host quarterly empowerment weeks for the wheelchair using community based on Zoom. If you go to our YouTube, you can see old ones. We also have Wheel With Me Adapt Fit. That is the fitness application and fitness platform for wheelchair users by wheelchair users. We also have a free private Facebook group. Look for Wheel With Me Adapt Fit. You can join us there. And if you want to find me personally, have a conversation, or if you want one-on-one coaching, if you're in the States, you can shoot me a text at 704-736-3222. Or you can find me at Jesi Stracham, looks like Stracham, on all platforms. That's YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever, wherever you get your social hit.
Love it. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been an awesome episode. Looking forward to seeing the final product.
Thank you so much for having me, Charlie. And y'all, if we said something today that resonates with you or that you feel like a friend can gain value from, please share the show. That's how Charlie's going to be able to grow and get this word out and this message out to more people. So share it with a friend that can actually gain value. And thank you for listening today.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Not Quite Podcast. Please make sure you follow us on TikTok and Instagram to get regular updates about the podcast.
These my dollars make it hurt.